Well, good morning, everyone. My name's Dave, and it's great that you're watching CRCK's Daily Connection. Today, we're going to be jumping in to 2 Corinthians chapter 8. I want to talk about money, and so does the Apostle Paul. A Christian talking about money. How does that sit with you? How do you feel when the service leader on our live stream or in church starts talking about the offering, asking members to pay up? Especially when you know that there's people who aren't Christians watching. Well, this morning in God's inspired word, his perfect word, Paul spends a whole chapter talking about money. He asks for money. Now, this means logically that there must be a good way in which to do that. Or at least there must be a way to ask for money which is totally separated from greed and guilt. So what is it that makes me squirm when I have to do a collection announcement and ask for money? Why do we get so defensive when we're talking about finances or giving? Well, for all of us, there's going to be a different reason for this. And you might not even feel this awkwardness. But our aversion to talking about money and asking for money in this way doesn't come from God. It's not biblical at all. The Bible actually talks about money a lot in a very clear and open way. Paul asks for this money from the Corinthians, and he frames it really well. Getting into this chapter is going to give us lots of principles for giving with a glad heart and even rejoicing in taking part in an offering. Letting these truths land on you and reminding yourself of them as you talk about money will transform the way that you view it. First of all, we see in this chapter the model we have for giving. In verse 9, it says Jesus himself was rich beyond rich, and he gave it up. As Christians, we follow in Jesus' footsteps of sacrifice. He became poor so that in his poverty, we could become rich. And we see a bunch of reasons to give as well, don't we? Why should I give up my hard-earned pay? Well, apart from the reason that Jesus gives it up himself, well, we see the Macedonian church. Well, their joy welled up in generosity. Through their own poverty, the life and joy given to them in Jesus meant that they urgently pleaded with Paul to take part in an offering. They asked Paul for the privilege of taking part in helping God's people. Now, that's a good way to think of it, isn't it? If we have money that we are able to give, what a privilege. And what an opportunity to bring someone else out of poverty. Whether it's to pay a minister's wage or a missionary's costs, so that they can provide for their family. Or if it's giving money to churches who are in need. Paul uses the example from Exodus, when God gives Israelites manna in the desert. There was enough for everyone if they took what they needed. The excess wasn't hoarded, but spread around so that everyone had enough. Now, the last thing we'll touch on is attitude. Paul says that those gifts that are accepted by God are those given willingly, out of what one has, not what one doesn't have. It's not about ticking a box begrudgingly and saying, I have given. It's actually about realizing the privilege you have and willingly, joyfully taking part. Now, there's many more mindset changing principles in this chapter. And I wonder, if you read it again, how many more nuggets of giving wisdom might you find? It's worth giving these principles more than just one read. Why don't we pray, and then after we finish, you can go and read that chapter again and keep thinking about this. Lord, you have given us all we have. This world, all our possessions are given, not earned. Thank you for your generosity to us. You've given us physical and spiritual riches. Let our example, Jesus, spur us on to to be generous in the way we handle our own money. Transform us to be joyful in giving, realising the privilege it is. We ask this in your name. Amen. Thanks for joining.